So now that we're acquainted with the process, what we're going to do next is bring one of our own custom creations from ZBrush into Character Creator, and of course rig, animate, pose it out, as well as bring in our own accessories from ZBrush into Character Creator, use those for our poses, and even bring accessories from Character Creator back into ZBrush to use, again, as we continue to create and organize our poses. Now, before we do that, there's a couple key topics that we need to discuss, one of those being poly count. In ZBrush by default, your poly count will probably be over here in the upper right hand corner. I moved mine over here to the left, and you're going to see for this character, this is 8 million points almost. Now, I don't want to send 8 million points over to Character Creator. I want to send over just enough Vertex data in order to hold my volumes, rig and animate it effectively, bring those back, and then get my high-res version of my mesh back. Luckily, if I go in here to the Subtool menu, and I'm going to Alt-tap the body so we have it selected, if I scroll down and open the Geometry submenu, you're going to see we have subdivision levels. So if I go down to subdivision level, or at subdivision level 3, you're going to see I have 500,000 points. But if I drop that down to 2, I'm down to 128,000. If I drop it down to 1, we're down to 32,000 polygons. So this is just fine to send over to Character Create. Character Create has a limit of 300,000 polygons, which equals about 600,000 triangles, which we're not going to get anywhere near. But like I said, generally speaking, you want to send over just enough verts in order to rig and animate effectively and then bring those back. Luckily, part of that process that we already know is when we hit GoZ, that's going to drop all of our subtools down to the lowest subdivision level, send that geometry over, again, pose, animate, bring those verts back. That will move these low-res verts while still retaining our subdivision history. So we'll have our low-res verts moved into the pose, and then we can just go up in our subdivision levels to continue creating high-resolution details. Now you may be thinking, well, I have a 500,000 polygon body, but as a Dynamesh, I don't have subdivision levels. I'm going to link in the description of this video. Actually, a couple videos in here are useful. There's the new proxy pose functionality in ZBrush 23. But down here where it says ZRemesh and Project History Refresher, this is a video that'll show you how to take a high-res Dynamesh that doesn't have any subdivision levels, ZRemesh it down to something reasonable that holds your volumes but doesn't have a lot of extraneous detail, and then you can use Project History and Subdivide backup so that you have a low-res mesh that you can use for UVing or animating, and then have a relationship between that low-res mesh to your higher resolution subdivision levels. Now, if you want to see how many polygons I'm actually going to be sending over, one thing you can do is you can either go over here to Pose Tools and hit this All Low button, or you can go in here to Subtool, hit this All Low button. That's going to drop all of your subtools down to the lowest subdivision level, which again, GoZ is going to do whenever we hit that button as well. And then we're going to go down here to Merge Visible. That's going to merge all of our low-res subdivision level geometry because that's what we have showing. So hit that button. That's going to make its own tool out here in our tool palette. Go ahead and select that. If I go into Polyframe here, you're going to see these are the actual polygons I'm sending over. Let's go ahead and turn off the colorize here so you can see that a little bit better. And again, if we look up here at our points, it'll say 76,000, and you can also hover over a subtool, and that'll tell you the poly count. So of course, 76,000 is well under the limits that Character Create has. And frankly, I wouldn't want to send over anything higher. Again, you just want to send over something that's going to be nice and performant and easy to work with, and then bring your high resolution back through subdivisions when you come back into ZBrush. So now that I actually have this object, there's another topic I want to talk about. If I go over here back to the original file, originally when we scaled this object, I said, hey, make sure to select your main body that has a, if I go into solo mode here, that has a, top of the head to the bottom of the feet, something that would encompass the bounding box. So when we resize your object, it'll make sure to do it for like an entire body. However, there are going to be some instances where you have a file that'll have like maybe a head showing and then maybe hands showing, and that's it. You won't have a full body in here. If that's the case, what you can do is just again go to All Low, merge everything together, go in here. I'm going to say insert that merged body here. So this is a low-res proxy of all of your subtools in your scene, and then you can have that selected when you resize, so you at least have a full body bounding box. And then when you're done resizing, just go ahead and just delete that out of your subtool stack, and you're good to go. Now, outside of subdivision history, there's another way you can have a high resolution object kind of in ZBrush. Now if I zoom in here on the cassette deck over here and I go into solo mode, you're going to see this looks nice and smooth. And if I go in here to polyframe, it looks very high res. However, if you look up here at my active points, they're not really that high res. It's only 3,000 polygons. If I scroll down here to my geometry submenu and open up dynamic subdivision, you're going to see I have a dynamic button. So you can turn that off, or you can hit D to turn it on and then Shift D to turn it off. And you're going to see this is just a preview of what these polygons would look like if I were to subdivide it. I don't have to subdivide it. I can just turn on this preview in ZBrush and it looks high res. But when I GoZ this over, it's just going to GoZ over the non-preview mesh, just these polygons sitting right here. Because again, this is just a preview. So that's two ways you can keep your poly count down while still having a high res look in ZBrush. Now you may have noticed when I went to all low, some of my Polypaint got a little crummy. So I'm going to zoom in here on my socks for the worst offender. And if I alt tap these socks, you're going to see this resolution looks pretty terrible on my Polypaint. However, if I go up to subdivision level 5, my Polypaint looks great. So what a Polypaint is vertex color. The more verts you have the paint on, the cleaner and more high resolution your Polypaint's going to be, because you're literally painting on more verts. The less verts you paint on, the less resolution your Polypaint's going to have. Now, sending this over to Character Create is totally fine. This is totally just an aesthetic thing we're talking about here. You can send this geometry over, rig it, pose it, bring it back. It's not going to affect anything, because when you bring these posed verts back, it'll go back to high and you'll still have your Polypaint. However, while we're in Character Create, just to have something nice to look at, again, just an aesthetic thing, we can actually work around this. Since I have subdivision levels, I'm going to scroll down here to, again, we're in our Z plugin menu. I'm going to scroll down here to UV Master, and I'm going to say Work on Clone. That's going to clone or duplicate this object into its own tool without any subdivision history, so I can UV this. If I turn on Polyframe, one thing we can do really quickly is just go down here to Polygroups, hit this Group by Normals. That'll give us polygroups for all these, this top part will have its own polygroup, and that'll make its own UV island if we want. So I'm going to turn this polygroup button on. We're going to hit Unwrap. We're going to hit Flatten to see our UVs. Everything looks fine. We have our own islands. We're going to unflatten this. We're going to copy these UVs. And then we're going to go back to our high-res mesh here with our subdivision levels. We have it selected. Our socks are right here. We're going to say paste our UVs. Let's go ahead and turn off Polyframe here. And one thing to be very careful of, when you're in here in UV Master and you paste, it might change the name. Let's go ahead and hit Rename, and we'll delete this _2 here. So now, that didn't really fix it. If I go down to subdivision level 1, it's still low res. However, if we go back up to subdivision level 5, and we go down to our texture map menu, we can hit New from Polypaint, and that will transfer our Polypaint to our new UVs and create a texture map for us. Before I do that, open up UV Map. This is where you can control the map size. Right now it's set to 1024. You can have a very high res of 2048 or 4096, or very low res of 512. Whatever you think will work, and you can actually test it out. Let's do 512 first, and we'll say New from Polypaint. Again, that's going to take our Polypaint information and transfer it to a texture. Now when I did that, and we zoom in here, you'll see it's not too terrible, but it's a little bit low res. If we choose 1024 and then hit that New from Polypaint again, it got a little more high res. I think this is plenty. So now when I go back here to subdivision level 1, you're going to see it has low res mesh but high res textures, because our texture map is turned on. If I turn that off, you'll see the Polypaint. If I turn it on, you'll see the texture map. So when I send this file from ZBrush over to Character Creator, it's going to send my low res mesh with a texture map, so it looks nice and pretty. Again, just aesthetic, just something nice to look at, but also useful to talk about when we get into Character Creator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to All High, and anything that I have painted, like my body here has some, nice painting on, I mean, not really nice, but has some painting on it. I'm going to go down here to Texture Map, choose our size, 1024 is fine. We're going to say New from Polypaint, and there it is, our Polypaint transferred to a texture map. Our jersey here with the 51 painted on it, go ahead and Alt-tap that subtool, say New from Polypaint, and then our eyes here as well, we'll Alt-tap the eyeballs, and we'll say New from Polypaint. So that way when we GoZ over our low-res geometry, our Polypaint will show up as a texture and look nice. One thing I should mention is this pattern on the pants and the pattern on the jersey, all that is a surface noise. So if I Alt-tap the jersey, for example, if I turn this noise off, this is just a tiling noise in here. Same thing for the pants. I can go down here, turn noise off and on. So when we send over our low-res geometry and then bring that back, our surface noise will still be attached to that subtool. We'll still have it. So now that we've discussed the basics of file preparation and best practices, let's go ahead and send this on over to Character Creator. Again, we'll do one last pass through, make sure everything's nicely named. Everything looks good. And if you want to, you can clean up your tool palette. Anything you don't need in here, you can just go ahead and say delete all. Say delete all. And while we're working, we're just going to go in here to File, Save As, and I'm going to save this as a Z project. You're going to see Basketball Pav Z project. I'm just going to save over that one. And now we have a nice ZBrush file ready to go. And actually, before we send this over, if you missed it from the last video, again, you can go in here, select your body mesh, and use this resize option. All you have to do is choose one of these presets or dial in how many centimeters or how many feet you want. Hit the resize button. This one's already been resized, so we're good to go. And again, with all of our subtools visible here, we're going to go up here to Tool, GoZ All. That's going to launch Character Creator for us, send over our low-res version. You can see it dropped our objects, our subtools down to our lowest res version. It's going to send those meshes over to Character Creator. And you're going to notice in the dialog option box that comes up, these are our GoZ options. Of course, you can keep these at the defaults for now. Create prop, update mesh and texture, merge all props under one node. But you can see this time we have a texture option. You can check these on or off. If you accidentally brought over a texture you don't want, just uncheck it. And you can even change the size. So for example, this jersey here, we can go ahead and drop that down to 1024 if we want. And then if we're ready to start the next part of the process, we can go in here to the update button. And again, that'll bring in all of our low-res geometry with our textures applied. And we can now rig and animate this character. Now, if you go in here to Edit, Preference, scroll down, you're going to see there's an info button you can turn on. This is all our info. You're going to see the object is sized correctly. And here, this is the number of triangles. Again, the number of triangles is about double the number of points that ZBrush told you. You can go ahead and turn info off, and we'll close out this menu. And you'll notice our textures came through. Everything looks nice and sharp. However, we lost the color on all of our other subtools. There's actually a couple ways we can handle this. So if we go over here to our scene, this is all the objects in our scene. So we'll go to the scene tab. Underneath this body top node, we have all of our subtools in here. And you're going to notice there's a shading option right next to the visibility. So for example, we're going to go down here to shorts. And if I click on this down arrow, you're going to see it's automatically set to normal. If I change that to smooth, that will actually show our vertex color. And because these were just filled with one solid color blue, this will work great. So essentially, this is our low-res Polypaint being applied to our object. Now, another option we can do is we can go up in here and we can choose this top body node. And then I'm going to go over here to the Modify section and choose the Material tab. In here, you're going to see we have a mesh name and a material name. These are all the materials that are assigned to all of our meshes in our scene right now. So in this case, I'm going to select wristband. So there's the wristband. I'm going to scroll down and you're going to see there's a diffuse color option. If I choose that, I can go through here, I can choose one of these colors, or I can go through here and modify the color to my liking. And then if I really like this and I'm going to use it again, I can go down here to adjust custom colors, and that'll put it down here in my custom colors section. So very quickly I can choose a blue for this object, hit OK. We can scroll back up. I can go down here to the hair. I can scroll back down, go to diffuse color, choose a color, hit OK. And I can continue to do that for the rest of my objects. Now you'll also notice if you choose, for example, the body, instead of going down here and changing the diffuse color, we're using a texture map. And you'll notice there's opacity, bump, AO, metallic roughness. You can set up an entire PBR compliant material within Character Creator to get a really nice object look. In this case, we're just going to use our base color. That's all the fidelity I need for this project, but that is available to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the shorts. I'm going to set this back to normal. And for most of these, let's go ahead and choose the body again. For most of these, I'm just going to go through here and set the color in the material. Now, the only object I'm not going to do that with is this little cassette player over here. I'm going to select Walkman case, and we're going to change this one to smooth because that has multicolor Polypaint applied to it. So here we have our entire character set up, looking nice with our textures and our material colors. So let's go through the process of rigging this one. I'm going to go a little bit faster than the previous video since we already know the basics. But of course, if you want to, again, get acquainted with those basics, please watch that video. So I'm going to select this very top node for the body. I'm going to go over here to our Modify panel under the Attribute tab, and we're going to choose AccuRig. By pressing this button, we're going to go into AccuRig mode. So now we're rigging, and the only option available right now is really to create guides. I'm going to go over here to the body. I'm going to turn off the eyeball. I'm going to go down here to the actual body geometry node, turn that eyeball back on. And then with body selected, I'm going to say create guides with selected meshes, because I want to put these guides where the bones are going to be, where the body is, not necessarily where a bunch of equipment is. So I'm going to say create guides. And just like I did before, I'm going to position these guides according to what this diagram says. So I'm going to go in here to the bone gizmo display settings, turn that size down just a tad. And again, following these diagrams, I'm going to take this top guide here. I'm going to move this just at the base of the skull where the neck plugs in. This guide right here, we're going to put at the base of the neck. This one here, we're going to follow the sweep of the neck down here, and then parallel to the traps over, we're going to position this shoulder. And while we're moving these, you're going to notice it's moving symmetrically because we have symmetry selection turned on. I'm going to put this where the elbow goes, and we have midpoint placement, so while I'm moving them, they're sitting right in the middle of our geometry, right where we want it. So we'll go ahead and move this into the wrist area. This one will go right underneath the belly button. This one will go right in the crease of the thigh here. Here's our knees, ankle. And then for our foot, I'm just going to move this forward right where the toes will start to bend. Now that we have these guides set up, I'm going to generate a skeleton. This one has 5 fingers, so I'm going to choose 5 and then say generate skeleton. And just like we did last time, now that we have bones in here, I can go in here and change any position of bones. If you want to, you can turn off midpoint placement, reposition these bones if you want, turn midpoint placement back on. And now let's set up these hands. I'm going to go over here to frame the right hand. And to position these a little bit better, you can go over here again to body. And instead of normal or smooth, we're going to choose wireframe on shaded. So we can use our geometry to position these bones. Now that our fingers have been placed, I'm going to go over here to body. We're going to set this to normal. And now I'm ready to bind our skin. Now I don't want to bind just the body, so I'm going to go back here to body, turn everything else on. And just like the demo soldier, we're going to choose what gets bound to the entire skeleton hierarchy and what gets bound to just one bone. So the obvious things are things that I don't want to bend. For example, if I was to bind this cassette deck to the joint hierarchy, when he bent his leg, some of these verts would come along with the leg and kind of stretch and squash and would start to bend this object. I don't want this object to bend. It is a rigid object. So I'm going to just bind this to one bone, which will make this an accessory. So I'm going to go through here. I'm going to shift select all of these objects. I'm going to go back through and deselect anything I don't want to bend with my joint hierarchy. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say, I'm going to hold down Control and select headband to deselect it. Glasses frames, teeth, hair, eyebrows, eyes, the headphones, the Walkman case, and then everything else I want bound to my entire skeleton, because I don't mind if they bend and they're going to be using multiple joints. So with these selected, and again I'm going to have selected meshes over here, and I'm going to say bind skin. And now that our skin is bound, you're going to see we have 2 sections here. We have the body with all our soft bound meshes, and then all of our accessories up here. If you want, we can go and use the check animation button before we exit AccuRig. You can put on a motion. So we'll click this and we'll go in here to body rig full body, and we'll do a quick calisthenics test. Everything's looking good. So let's turn off the check animation button, and then we'll press AccuRig to exit AccuRig mode. Now, before we do any accessory stuff, let's go ahead and relink in ZBrush. And this is going to be a common theme you're going to see as we move forward, is constantly keeping our ZBrush file relinked and updated with what we have going on in Character Creator. So I'm going to go up here to select the character node, the top character node, just in case anything moved, which in your case, if you had your character halfway through the floor, or the size changed significantly, you definitely want to do this step. So again, top character node selected, we're going to GoZ back to ZBrush. It's going to automatically default to relink, so we're going to relink all of our objects. We'll choose current pose, hit GoZ. In our case, nothing's really going to happen, but again, just another really super important step as you work. Now, if we shut down ZBrush and we shut down Character Creator and we wanted to resync these files, you need to make sure you have a file saved, ready to go. So we're going to go in here to File, Save. So we're going to go ahead and save over our previous ZBrush project. And then in Character Creator, we need to save this file as well. In the previous video, we went over here to File, Save Project As, and that's totally valid, but there's another method you can use. If we go to our content section, we're going to switch over from template over to custom. And you can see we can save all sorts of custom stuff in here. So for our character, if we're in the custom tab, when we go down here to save, it'll bring up a dialog box. We'll go ahead and name this. And under asset type, you're going to see it's going to save as a project, which is totally fine. I'm going to hit OK. And after it's done, it's going to put this little dialog box in here. If you want to see where it went, it's a project. So underneath custom, there's a project section, CC project, and there we have our basketball pav. Now, just to explain the buttons down here, if I hit save again, it's going to bring up another dialog box. Save is going to be the same thing as going up here to File, Save Project As. It'll save a completely new project. If I make any changes to this project, for example, like just zooming my camera in, I can hit Overwrite. That'll say, do I want to replace it? Hit OK. That'll update our current project. In this case, it gave us a new thumbnail. That's the same thing as going up here to File, Save Project. So now we have this project saved, we have our ZBrush file saved, and these are both linked together. So now let's bring our ZBrush accessories over to Character Create now that we're linked. So I'm going to hit this, go back to ZBrush. We're going to load tool. I'm going to bring in a basketball and a controller. I'm going to hit open. We're going to go back to our character here. And if you use this subtool insert button, it'll insert your object directly underneath that subtool. In this case, I want to put these at the very bottom of our stack, way down here at the bottom. So instead of insert, I'm going to go to append. We're going to append the basketball. We're going to append the controller. Let's go ahead and rename these. When we appended them, it added a 1, so we'll just delete the 1 out of there. We'll ensure that everything is turned on. I'm going to hit Tool, GoZ, All. And then back in Character Creator, it's going to default, the GoZ option is going to default to Custom. And if I scroll down, all of these things are going to be set to update, except for these last two. The basketball and the controller will be set to Create Accessory. So let's go ahead and hit Update. And if I zoom out, you're going to see we have a controller, a basketball. Let's switch over to Scene. And you're going to see those two are now loaded in as accessories. Now, I want the character to interact with these accessories in a very specific way. For example, I want the controller and the basketball to be associated with his right hand. Right now, if I hit the W key on my keyboard, you're going to see that's going to switch to move mode. And in fact, if I hit W again, it'll toggle between world and local move. But if I were to try to move this into place, the pivot is way down here in the world center. So with this object selected, I'm going to scroll down to where we have the pivot section here. There's a quick set drop down menu, and you can also use this little diagram here. So if you want to set the pivot right in the middle of the object, you can click middle, or if you want it over here on the right, you can do that as well. And in fact, let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. If we want to put this pivot in a very specific spot, we can go down here to Edit Pivot. That'll put us in Edit Pivot mode. I'm going to move this over a little bit and just have the pivot set kind of on the right-hand side of the controller. So we're going to go out of Edit Pivot mode. So now when I move this object around, so let's hit W, it'll move from that pivot point. So I'm going to move, scale and rotate, but just move and rotate really. And go ahead and put that right in his hand. So I've positioned this and I've set the pivot, but this isn't really associated with my character's hand. So go ahead and select the object, scroll down, and you're going to see there's an attach section. Right now it's attached to the bone root. I want to pick a different parent. Since I want to parent it to his hand, I'm going to say pick parent. I'm going to select the hand area, and that selected the CC base R hand. If it didn't get it exactly right, just go in here to this menu right here and then choose whichever bone this needs to be associated with. So now whenever the character moves his arm, the hand will follow, and then wherever that hand joint goes, the controller will follow. And we're going to do the exact same thing to the basketball. So go ahead and select the basketball, scroll down. We're going to set the pivot. I'm going to set it right at the top of the basketball. I'm going to move it into place. And if that controller's in the way, feel free to go over here and turn visibility off temporarily. And again, we want this basketball associated with his right hand. So we're going to go up here. We're going to say pick parent, choose the right hand joint. And before I do any animating, I'm going to go ahead and relink ZBrush back with this file. So I'm going to make sure everything's turned on, basketball controller and all my other subtools. We're going to select this very top node, hit GoZ. We're going to choose relink, current pose, hit GoZ. And that'll move the basketball and controller into place. Now that everything's relinked, let's hop back into Character Creator and we'll start posing him. I'm going to select the body node in our scene tab. We're going to switch back to content, and instead of custom, we're going to go back to template. We're going to go over here to animation, motion. Let's go in here to human male perform, and I'm going to double click birdcage, and that'll assign the birdcage animation to his skeleton here. I'm going to scrub through here, and we're going to pick a pose. This one looks like he's kind of going in for a layup, so I'll use this as a starting point for my pose. Now, in order to fine tune this, we'll go back here to scene. Again, I have body selected. We can go in here to motion, edit pose. This will bring in our IK and FK mode here. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the ankles here. So when I move his hips around, again, we'll hit E for rotate. I can kind of really lean him forward here, and we'll go ahead and update this pose. Let's go ahead and get this controller out of the way by turning off visibility. We'll go back here into body, go back into edit pose. And for these hands, what I can do to quickly move the hands around, I can choose this palm area, and then when I click and drag up, that will flex and curl the fingers, so it's like a fist to kind of an extension, so I can extend all the fingers out at once. And then if I go left to right, that'll actually spread the hand out. And then I can either click on these icons in the window to fine-tune my pose, or I can go in here and choose the bones themselves to rotate around. Now, for the other hand, one cool thing we can do, let's go ahead and edit out of this mode just for a second. I'm going to go back in here to content, and underneath the gesture section, you're going to see we have a bunch of hand options in here. So if you can find a hand gesture that you like maybe splayed A, you can drag that onto your character. We're going to choose left hand. That'll go ahead and adjust that pose, and then we can go back into edit pose mode, and we can refine the hand pose from there. Right, now that we got a pose that we like, I'm going to go through, we're going to close this out. I'm going to send this pose over to ZBrush. We're going to make sure everything is turned on. I'm going to choose this very top character node. And instead of GoZing this over, we're going to use the plugin ZBrush pose link, send current pose to ZBrush pose tools. What that's going to do is create a layer for every single subtool in our scene. It's going to move those low-res verts into position to match this pose in character create, and give us a organized layer button over here that we can use to quickly switch between different poses. Alright, so we have our newly posed character. I have it, it's named as pose 1 by default. I'm going to go through here and hit rename. We'll call this layup. And let's hop back into character create. If we want to get rid of this, we can go in here to remove, restore bind pose. Let's go back to our content, and instead of doing an animation this time, let's go down here to the pose section. We'll say male pose. We'll make him a cool guy. So we're going to take him this against the wall. We'll just drag that onto our character. That'll quickly pose him out. And just like we did before, in this case, I'm going to go in and we're going to hide the basketball, and then we're going to use the controller. So I'm going to select body again. We're going to go into edit pose. I'm going to rotate his hand around so we can see that controller. If we're happy with that pose, again, make sure everything is turned on. Go to the very top node. We'll say plugins, ZBrush pose link, send current pose to ZBrush pose tools. And that's going to do the exact same thing. It's going to move all of our low-res geometry into position with a new layer created for every subtool, and then give us another option over here in our character pose tools. Alright, so just like last time, here's our pose. We're going to say rename. We'll call this lean. And like I said before, if we scroll down and go to layers, you're going to see we have layers for all of our subtools here. And if I want to switch between them, all I have to do is go over here to our pose tools and click on whichever pose I want to see. So now that we're starting to stack up multiple accessories, you can see we have a basketball and a controller in this case. For certain poses, I only want to see certain accessories. So for example, if I'm playing basketball, maybe I don't want to have the controller in my hand, and maybe I want to take my glasses off. So what I can do is use these visibility sets within ZBrush. So V1, I'm going to leave just to have all my subtools visible. I'm going to go over here to V2. And if I want to turn off the visibility for all of my subtools, I can hold down Shift and turn off any eyeball. That'll turn off all the visibility for my subtools except for the subtool I have selected. If I want to turn everything on, I can hold down Shift and touch any eyeball that's not on, and that will make all of my subtools visible. So again, with V2 selected, I'm going to go down here, I'm going to deselect or turn the visibility off for the controller, and you're going to see it's still visible. That's because the controller subtool is selected. If I select any other subtool, it'll disappear. So now V2 has all of my subtools visible except for the ones I don't want. In this case, we'll turn off glasses. And you know what? I'm probably not going to be playing basketball with my Walkman or my headphones. So this is my basketball visibility set. If I want to do a cool guy visibility set, we'll go over here to V3. Again, I'll go ahead and turn everything on by holding down Shift and turning on the eyeball. I'm going to switch over to my lean pose. And I'm going to turn off my basketball. So now no matter what pose I select, I can choose a corresponding visibility set in order to get the look that I want. So we've discussed taking custom accessories over to Character Create. Let's bring some accessories from Character Create back into ZBrush. In order to do that, I'm going to go out of any of my poses. So I'm going to deselect the lean. That's going to put us back in our default pose. I'm going to go back to V1, which is all of our subtool visibility here. I'm going to go back to Character Create. I'm going to go in here to Remove, Restore Bind Pose. And this is very important. Go back to ZBrush. Go up here to GoZ, and we're going to GoZ all again to relink our files. Everything by default should be set to update this time because these are no longer being added as accessories. They're already accessories in our file, so update is appropriate, and we'll just hit update. There we go. Our files are relinked. So let's go ahead and add some accessories from Character Creator's content. So we're going to go in here to the Content Template section. Let's go to the Accessories area, and underneath Head, there's a cool accessories we can choose. So I'm going to swap out my glasses with these sunglasses. I'm going to drag this into my scene, and we're going to go back here to Scene. We're going to have sunglasses selected, and let's go ahead and move these into place here. And just like we've done before, we can temporarily turn off the glasses frames and make sure everything's positioned correctly. With sunglasses selected, let's go back to the Attribute tab. I'm going to scroll down, and you can see Base Head is already selected as the attachable joint, so that's perfect. Let's go back here into Content. Let's drag out a hat. I'm going to do the exact same thing with this hat. We're going to ensure that CC Base Head is the attachment for the hat. Let's go back to Scene. I'm going to make sure everything is turned on. And as you can see here, we've added hat and sunglasses to our scene. So we're going to go up here to the very top node. We're going to say GoZ. I'm going to say Relink. And you can see sunglasses and hat are set to create. I'm going to GoZ that over. And there we go. We've updated our ZBrush file with a new hat, a new sunglasses. If I look down here at the bottom of my subtool stack, there's our new hat and sunglasses. So again, you can keep sending things back and forth from ZBrush to Character Creator, create new poses, add those poses over here to your pose tools, create new visibility sets to show and hide different accessories depending on the pose. So overall, a super fast, flexible system to quickly get your characters posed out just the way you want. I'm going to record an addendum in here just in case you want to go into Character Creator and just bring some accessories over and you're not trying to link files, you just want to grab some accessories. That's totally easy to do too. All you have to do is go in here to Character Creator, go in here to your Content tab. Again, we'll hop in here to Accessory. Let's go down here to Others, Light Armor. I'm going to drag in a Viking axe. And the cool thing about Character Creator accessories is with this selected, we can go in here or scroll down. You can see it automatically picks a pretty good guess on what bone you're going to want. In this case, our hand, and that's perfectly fine. And so all we have to do is kind of position this quickly. And then again, if I just want to send this on over, I just go to Scene, select the axe alone by itself, hit GoZ. It's going to send this axe over with a create action. We'll go ahead and hit GoZ. And there we go. The axe is put in our file. If we go down to the bottom of the stack, here's our axe. And we're ready to use that for any purposes that we would want to use that for in ZBrush. In the next video, we're going to go over the process for painting weights in Character Creator, as well as how to simulate cloth as we scrub animations so we can send poses with cloth assets to our Pose Tools plugin.